Roger, thank you for agreeing to do this video interview with us. May we start off by asking, what have you been up to lately?
Well, for the past 10 years, in March and April, I do the same thing. I've been getting ready for the ISBI conference, and that always takes a lot of my time. We have the workshops we're certainly getting ready for. The Institute. The Institute this year was pretty exciting, actually. Although we had a smaller number, we had people from China there, we had people from Portugal, and we had people from Colombia. So I thought, from a small group, I thought it was great. Not only that, I worked with Mickey Lane on it, and we learned as much as I think the participants do in the course. So it was pretty exciting for us.
Excellent. Can you tell us about any publications, any articles or books that you've recently published and or are working on?
Well, thank you for asking. Yes, we just completed a book called Performance Architecture, the Art and Science of Improving Organizations. I was pleased to do that with two co-authors, Carol Haig and Lynn Carney. I've worked with them for many, many years, and so we finally got everything down. I was really pleased also and honored to have Gary Rumler do the preface for me. And so I think that was one of the last things he actually wrote before it was published. And so he also was gracious to open up his library for us, and that was fairly significant for the development of the book. And he's in the preface. He says, I've been asking Roger for 10 years to write this stuff down. So finally, I did, and he got to see it. And Don Toasty actually wrote the afterword. So I've got two good people, forward and afterward, writing in there. And so I was really happy that I could do that. So, and then we continue with Carol Haig and I continue in Performance Express, doing the interviews with various people over. We've been doing this for maybe 5 or 6 years on trend spotters. And what we've done now in the last couple of years have focused on tools and resources that people can use, and they're all online. And then I just talked to my friend Paul Harmon, who does a great newsletter on BPM, and we're going to start doing a quarterly report for his newsletter. So we're trying to tie the performance side into more of the systems thinking that he does. So those are the publications I've been up to lately.
Well, excellent. You've been a longtime member of the Society, and you are now a staff member, but I know that you were a volunteer many, many years here. Can you give us a little of your background of your volunteerism for the Society and what kinds of groups and task force and committees that you've been involved with?
Well, I have to go back and think about all those different committees and task force. I certainly started off at the chapter level, chapter president, although I attended ISBI a long time before that. It was interesting. I started when I was actually in high school attending. Well, maybe I'll get into that a little bit later. But at the chapter level, and I think many people got started that way. So chapter president, then volunteering for different committees. I read a lot of proposals, and reading proposals is a good idea because you learn a lot what people are doing. So I encourage people to get on those committees. Certainly, one time we had chapter liaisons. I was one of those. I think it's interesting how things go around. I think they're going to maybe bring that back up again or some form of it. Then at the national level, I still kept involved with, again, volunteering for different committees and working with the conferences. I remember it was actually, we did it a little differently. We used to have people in charge of conferences. So you had a conference manager. Now, even though we have a conference manager now, when I was doing it, it's a little different because everything from, I know they hire audiovisual people now. I remember I went out to search for my audiovisual chairperson, and she went, and this was in San Francisco, she went to all corporations all over San Francisco bringing in, at that time all we had to have was overhead projectors, but projectors were, I think we had to have 150 projectors and flip charts and everything else, but we borrowed them from every company in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's changed a little bit over the years, I think for the better. And then at that time, to run the conference, you had almost 200 volunteers just to run the conference. So each of those committees had to work them out. So it was a similar society but different in the sense we were a lot more driven of the day-to-day operations were done by volunteers. So I think that was just. I think our volunteer services are still there today. I think in a lot different light. I think at a much higher level. You're not going out and getting projectors anymore, which I think is a lot different.
Well, then you transitioned from being just a volunteer in the society to now a staff member. And can you give us a little of your history as a staff member and what your role is on the staff?
Right. Well, it's really interesting. It was 10 years ago this month at the conference in San Francisco, I think it was. And Rick Battaglia approached me, and I know that they had been thinking about a job of bringing somebody with the technology or the experience on board. And I know it had been talked about in the past, and Rick said, he thought about opening this position up. And I know they did post for it. I was happy that I interviewed for it, and so I became the Director of Human Performance Technologies. And we actually talked about technologies. And I think that was a good approach, because one of the things that ISPI has always talked about are what is a technology. And I know historically we've always said it's the equipment and the machinery and things like that. But actually, if you look at the first definition of technology in the dictionary, it really doesn't say anything about machinery. It talks about the whole idea of a technology of applied science. And I think if you look back at the roots and the tradition of ISPI, we've always had, I don't want to say a scientific, but we often have, we've tried to look at the research behind what we do and how we do it. So I think we continue to look at that through our technology, our applied science. And so for the last 10 years, I've done all the educational work, bringing in the institutes, defining the institutes. I always had. And one of the things we also did through our institutes, we always made sure we had members who had done the work as part of the faculty. I think that made a big difference in the way we decided to go in the model that we used. And then we've expanded to our fall conference. We have our in-house institutes, workshops. So we just try to expand our product line. Because at one time, our only product was our conference and our newsletters and our publications, but we had to see that we expanded a little bit. So that's what I've been doing for about 10 years now.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned earlier that your first introduction to the society was back when you were in high school. Can you tell us, I've heard this story many times in the past here, but can you tell our audience here more about that?
Yes. I was living in, I was in high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my brother Don Toasty, and maybe a lot of people don't realize that Don Toasty is my brother. He was working for a teaching machines company, and that they needed, at that time they called them subjects. One time they said they were participants, but they called them subjects. So I became a subject, and I found out I could make 50 cents an hour after school, which was not too bad. And I was testing programmed instruction. And I just sort of like, you think about high school students hanging around places. I started hanging around Teaching Machines Incorporated in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They hired me after school to take all of the program instructions and compare them to what the students were doing, to what I was doing. And I was circling responses and turning over data to people. And I didn't know what I was circling responses to. I didn't know I was collecting data, but that's what it turned out to be later on. It turned into, I just sort of fell into the whole area of performance improvement and working for eventually Lloyd Homme, and one of the founders of ISPI, and program instruction. And if you read a lot of the history, early history, you'll see a lot of it. For example, one of the things many people don't know about catching the employee doing something right, Lloyd Homme came up with that in the early 60s. And you now see this in many of our publications. Then I went over to work in the Westinghouse Learning Labs when they transferred over to that. And at that time, I was working in the back shop, in the back room, and Dr. Homme, I talked to him about reinforcing things. He was reinforcing events. And I said I wasn't getting all the things that, I was giving the reinforcers out to the students, but not getting much response. So I said I came up with this idea, which I didn't know any better. I came up with this idea called the reinforcing event menu, where you actually listed the items and let the students choose their reinforcers. And Lloyd said that was a good idea. So he said, you want to do a paper with me? I think I was 20 years old at that time. And so we wrote the first paper on the reinforcing event menus. And sort of somewhat, you still see those things around. I bet a lot of people don't know where those came from, but working with Lloyd in the back shop. You have to remember, at that time, I still hadn't had a college education yet. So I went off to work on my undergraduate work and then eventually my master's and doctorate in psychology and educational psychology at Baylor University, and had just wonderful experiences there too. I mean, they pretty much let me design my own program because there was no program on performance improvement or whatever this area we call a body of literature. But luckily there was a gentleman at Baylor that said that, and he knew about us actually too, and let me design the whole program. I was also working with an interesting gentleman there, was the Associate Commissioner of Education. He had just left the Department of Education, went to Baylor University, set up a chair in the physics department. We were housed in the basement of the physics building. And it was an institute there, and we were to look at educational programs all over the United States and see what we could do to improve the educational experiences. And then in the summertime, I would run what we call their upward bound programs, and did that for several years also. So I mean, that's a very small part. But what I think the big thing is that I always worked with the students or the subjects or the participants. I always tried to look at it from their perspective. And I think that's helped me throughout the years to do that. So, and then certainly when I worked for, well, I don't know if you wanted to talk about my job at Wells Fargo or not,
yes.
but that's well.
Tell us a little about your application of performance improvement at Wells Fargo.
Yeah. Well, after I graduated, after I got my graduate degree, I went to California. I was living in Texas for about 10 years, so I decided maybe it's time to get back to California. I did that and worked for Don Toasty for a while, and then I had an opportunity to start working for Wells Fargo, and another one of those things that a person that hired me there knew about ISPI, knew about performance improvement, and knew that there were probably other things that we should be looking at to improve performance. Now, certainly in 1983, we did not call it performance consulting or anything like that. However, that's what we were doing. And eventually, when Jean Nixon left, she didn't leave the organization, she went into the part of the organization, is that they asked me to take over that department, and then for about the next 17 years, we had a performance improvement department focusing on not only the educational needs of the people at Wells Fargo, but the total performance aspect of it. I chose the word educational experiences or learning experiences because there were so many things that we were doing besides just training in the organization. Certainly, we became very adept at writing job aids. Job aids, we learned to use job aids for lots of different things. And again, they were always held well for us and got a lot of the information out very quickly. That I can remember management always would ask us, can you do a job aid for that? So if you think about people saying, can you do training for that? We had, can you do a job aid for that? Well, that made our job a lot easier. I remember one time too is that I was changed over to a line position, line manager, and she could never figure out quite what we were doing. And it was always this, this discussion we would have back and forth. And I remember one day she came in and she almost said, "Oh, I finally got it." Not quite that way, but finally got it. She says, "What you do or what we do is we make life easier for the branches or our business partners. And so I think we'll start calling ourselves Making Life Easier for the Branches. So actually, she came up with a whole department, not only us, but other parts of the organization, and we were called Making Life Easier for the Branches. Well, sort of once you make that change, you can do lots of more things. And I think over those 17 years, if I look back, is that we were involved with, the staff was involved, myself was involved with lots of different projects that moved the organization forward with our line managers. Our line managers were our partners. And in reality, I thought that's why everybody worked. And until I actually got out and doing some other type of consulting and found out that wasn't the way many people worked. But I also think is that if we just take the initiative to go out with our line managers, we can learn a lot from them, and they can learn a lot from us. And I think I would just say, if I had one piece of advice, is don't hold yourself back. Go out and do it. And Jim Hill talks about the moxie factor, and actually we just interviewed Jim about that. And I think that's what we're talking about. Take the initiative to go out there and be more proactive rather than waiting for business. I doubt it's going to happen if you do it that way.
Let me shift gears here a little bit, and part of what we would like to accomplish with this legacy series is to capture stories and memories of some of our members from the earlier days, not necessarily always from the earlier days, but so are there some stories and memories that you can share with us about some of our members of the past?
Yeah, you're going to get me on this one. There's so many. I mentioned Lloyd Homme. Certainly was instrumental in the work that I did and finding probably some of the direction I had. And of course, Don Toasty. They did some of the pioneering work with performance improvement, program instruction. If you read the early papers, you'll see their work being quoted. It's quoted today. Jim Evans is another person who was at the Teaching Machines Incorporated. For those early years, there were a lot of people. I remember Bob Mager would visit Teaching Machines, and at that time, unicycles were sort of things where people were learning to ride. And I remember Bob Mager riding in the halls of ISBI, or not ISBI, but Teaching Machines, and riding unicycles in the hallways. And so that's one of my memories of Bob Mager going back. And certainly he was always the magician, and I didn't know who he was actually until later in life. And interesting, I just got an email from him while I was here at the conference, and he's doing fine and still in Carefree, Arizona. So we do stay in contact. Roger Kaufman still stays very active. I've known him for many years, and his work dealing with society and those areas are still, he's perfected that over the years. That has influenced us as we go forward. We've even added to one of the categories, worker, and workplace, and now we have the world. So I think that's been instrumental in the work that I've done. There are George Geis. Certainly, I remember people don't remember George Geis, but George Geis around the researcher and really all around knowing what the technology is about and how to work the technology on our practical experiences, and being a real good educational leader. Certainly learned a lot from him. Certainly Gary Rumler. I mean, about the past 10 years, I've got closer with Gary. Geary, we have to make sure we pronounce his name correctly, Gary Rumler. My first course with him was in 1978, I believe, when he was with Praxis. He taught the course. I came to San Francisco. He came to San Francisco then, and I took the course then. And from that point on, I used his models and tools, but also always fit in the same framework. I've been around long enough to see that there's similarities between all these people who are writing these things. And the reason why there were similarities is because in reality, they all connected in some way. If you look at the tree of the ISPI tree, there's connections between all these people, and if you look back up, they do have a connection with B.F. Skinner. Lloyd Homme and Tom Gilbert, Sue Marco were all working together. You take that, and then you see that Rumler has a connection with Gilbert, and then Don has a connection with Lloyd Homme, and Lloyd Homme has a connection with Gilbert. I mean, it's just all packages, and so you wonder why some of these things are similar. I don't, because they, in reality, they were, there was some collaboration in a sense, although they all run their own businesses, and so they were sometimes collaborating, but sometimes they were competing against each other. That's Joe Harless. I forgot to mention Joe Harless. Joe Harless, when I was president of ISBI, I thought, who am I going to have as the banquet speaker? And I think you actually have Joe's banquet speech on from that conference.
Yes. When
he was the wizard. And I remember he said, I don't want anybody to know I'm here at the conference. So no one, he never showed up during the conference. He finally got during the last night, and I brought on the Wizard of Noonan, Georgia. And he was in his full costume with beard and everything, and he gave a wonderful presentation and left. And nobody saw him again. So it was, that was a great experience. And he has his book on An Ounce of Analysis. Is just, it's still on my shelf. I wish he would let us publish it again. I know he's a little hesitant of doing that, but if he looks at this, my plea is let him publish that one again, because that's a great book. Today, Allison Rossett, the work that she has done has influenced what I've done. Margot Murray with her mentoring programs. I mean, there's just, I could go on and on. People who have influenced what I do, who are still very active in ISBI, that have made a difference. And I'm sure that I'm forgetting someone, as they say, but maybe we'll have a chance to do this again.
Yes, but let's go back, and can you tell us any personal stories to give us a flavor of their character, such as Bob Mager riding his unicycle down the halls? Right. That's great.
Well, it's interesting. Let me go back to Lloyd Homme. Is that at the Westinghouse Learning Corporation labs? And I remember as that we all, we'd work from Monday to Friday, and then everybody would come in on Saturday and work on Saturday morning and do what, getting caught up or whatever, but lunch every Saturday for years, 4 or 5 years, everybody go out to lunch, and we go to Bacchus restaurant in Albuquerque. And so that became somewhat of a routine. So these not only became working relationships, they became closer in nature. I've noticed over the years that these relationships have stayed fairly close. I know I was just here at a board meeting, and Margot and I were sitting and talking about some of the things that making ISBI and move forward. And I just noticed Allison Rossett just walked by, and I was just talking about her, and she's still very active in the society as well. So
even though she's 164 years old.
She just said she's 164 years old, and she needed a cup of coffee, so she's here with us too. I've known Allison for too many years and watched her grow over those years and bring her students to the conference, so that's been great. That's the other thing too. I think you've seen that I've noticed over the years a lot of students, interaction with students. So those are the personal experiences that I think have grown during that time.
Now, since you've introduced the fact that Don Toasty is your brother, which I've known for a number of years now, but you got any dirt on Don that you can share that's not too dirty?
Let me think.
A funny story.
I can tell you a story about when we was growing up.
Okay.
I do that. Is that I know when we were growing up, my mother would always come in the house and she would say, Don, would you empty the trash? And Don would always come back and say, I don't have my shoes on. And for years, I thought that was an excuse of not doing things, as I don't have my shoes on. And he kept getting me on those types of things. So those are, and not only that, people probably don't realize, when you're younger, you share bedrooms together. So we had a bedroom together until he got much older. Don's a little older than I am. I have to say that. But that's one thing. And then certainly over the years, he's certainly been a strong support of what I've done. And but even to this day, I always remind him. I says when he doesn't do something, I says, "Does that mean you don't have your shoes on?" That's a sort of a family inside joke. Now you'll understand when I say to him, "Don, put your shoes on. Get it done." Don's a great writer. We have I contact him fairly often, even today, and he has a lot of input to what we do, and that's the reason why I asked him to also do the afterword for the book. That was important. There's other stories too that I'm sure that I can't tell on the video.
Well, let's shift slightly then to the person that did the foreword for your new book, Gary. And having worked with him so closely for the last 10 years, and of course there's a lot of downtime that's not the on the platform time where you're out to dinner or such. Share a personal anecdote about Gary.
This is one of the, several years ago, we were over staying in the house. He had the main house and the office house. So we were staying in the office house, and we were working up there, and Margaret said, you can't come down to the main house for all day. So we had lunch up there, and it's always wonderful to be in the environment, because that was Rumler's or Gary's treasure chest. So a friend of mine was working with Margaret, and we knew they were working on the house in some way. And when we finally got permission to go down to the main house, they had painted the fireplace purple. Now, when you say purple, you think, oh, I can't believe. But you have to remember what Gary's and Margaret's house looked like. It's very much southwest, and it was when I say purple, it was a very southwest purple. And if you look at all their paintings in their house, it matched everything. But I thought Gary was somewhat taken back, but he had no idea that he was going to have a purple fireplace. And then from that point on, it was a redesign of the house, and so that was one. Probably a lot of people don't know that little story about redesigning the house. And then the other thing of just one of the things that the first time I went down to visit Gary is he had a large collection of Indian fetishes, and I don't know if you know what fetishes are, but they're Indian carvings, or little carvings that people of Indians had done, or the Southwest Indians had done for many years. And so he has a great collection of it. And I told him, I said, I've been collecting these for many years also. And so for almost the last 10 years, and even last September, when we had a little party for the book, Gary gave me a fetish for my collection, and I still have that. So those are probably some personal things that people don't know about Gary.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Looking forward to the future here, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Society here, and 3 conferences from now. What are your thoughts and plans and ideas about how we might celebrate 50 years?
Well, one of the things that some suggestions have come up is that we probably should be looking at some of what ISKPI can do for societal issues or the society. And I thought, one of the members came up and had a great idea. Every year we give a little plaque to people, and that's probably another thing. One thing they probably don't need is another plaque. And the idea was to start maybe, in doing something green. And saying, we're planting trees in your name, or we're doing our mosquito nets for malaria, or things like this. I think for our 50th anniversary, I'd like to see us take a more active role in some of these more world issues that we're looking at. I think that would be a value to their members, would be value to ISPI, and be value to those people who are not members who maybe not know us. And I know many of our people have done that, but I think maybe we should maybe make it more official in nature. I think that's one thing I'd like to see for the 50th anniversary. I'd like to see our celebration of people who maybe have been around for a while, to celebrate their accomplishments and seeing what they have provided for us. So again, I think those things would all be great as we go forward.
Well, thank you, Roger, for participating in this video interview, and again, thanks for your service to the Society.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it. Let's do it again next year.